Hello, I'm Miranda Kahn.
And I'm John Bachman. Coming up today on Newsmax Now, police now have a suspect in the slayings of a Washington, D.C. family and their housekeeper inside their multi-million-dollar home. We're expecting a news conference coming up very shortly. We'll try to take you there. More on this story straight ahead.
And some call it Rand stranding. Even member of his own party are calling the Kentucky senator's faux filibuster fear-mongering. Was it that or a brilliant political play? That's just ahead in our roundtable.
And America says goodnight to late-night legend Dave Letterman, hanging it up. Highlights from last night's show coming up.
All that and much more just ahead on Newsmax Now. And good afternoon and welcome to this Newsmax Now Thursday edition, May 21st.
Good to have everybody with us. Police are hunting for that suspected killer in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It turns out pizza may have been a clue in cracking that case, the DNA evidence. We'll have more on that coming up. Also on Capitol Hill, Rand Paul has been talking a lot about the Patriot Act. But first, we turn our attention to the Senate. They've agreed to move ahead with a final vote on President Obama's trade bill. That 62-38 vote to end debate on the bill moves it forward for a final vote. That is a huge victory for the president.
Right now, we're treating every American in one category. There is a general veil of suspicion that is placed on every American now. Every American is somehow said to be under suspicion because we're collecting the records of every American.
Discussion on that trade bill delayed yesterday because of Rand Paul's talkathon. It wasn't actually a filibuster. He spent hours yesterday on the Senate floor speaking about the bulk collection of phone records from Americans by the NSA. The provisions of the Patriot Act that allow it expire at the end of this month. Meantime, New York Congressman Peter King, speaking to Newsmax, slammed Paul's antics, saying that what he's doing is misleading, fear-mongering, and inexcusable.
A study that said people opposed to gay marriage could have their minds changed by a short conversation with a person who's gay is now being retracted. Study co-author and Columbia professor Donald Green says he had to issue the retraction after finding out his co-author allegedly faked the data. The study was published late last year in the journal Science.
Police in Washington, D.C. now have identified a suspect in a quadruple murder inside a mansion not far from the official residence of the vice president. Darren Wint is wanted on first-degree murder charges. Several reports say his DNA matched pizza crust found on the scene. He obviously had been eating that. He allegedly killed a couple and their 10-year-old son and their housekeeper, then set the home on fire. Police say he also got away with around $40,000. And again, we're expecting a news conference shortly. We'll try to bring you there. An Omaha police officer has been killed now in the line of duty one day before she was supposed to go on maternity leave. Officer Karen Orozco was killed in a shootout yesterday afternoon. The suspect was also killed. Orozco gave birth back in February to a little girl prematurely. She delayed taking her maternity leave until the baby could leave the hospital, which was supposed to happen today. She leaves behind her husband as well, another little girl, and two stepchildren. Tough one there. A frightening prediction from a former deputy director of the CIA on the war on terror.
I believe, based on my experience, that my children's generation and my grandchildren's generation is still going to be fighting this fight.
Yeah. There he was speaking to our own Steve Malzberg. Mike Morrell says it will take years to turn around the radicalization process. He says that's part of the war on terror America has not been doing very good at. He also says, we're doing well at, he also says we have been good at taking care of current terrorists on the battlefield, but protecting the homeland as well. The other issue is that radicalization. We'll have more on that coming up later today.
Speaking at a business roundtable in New Hampshire, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush places the blame for the rise of ISIS on President Obama. He says the withdrawal of 10,000 American troops allowed ISIS to grow, and he believes, knowing what we know now, those troops should have stayed. Federal investigators are now sifting through cell phone records of the engineer in charge of that Amtrak train that crashed last week. They want to know if Brandon Bastian was on his phone when his train hit a curve in Philly. The train was going more than twice the speed limit. Engineers are supposed to have their phones off when behind the controls. 8 people died in that crash and more than 200 were hurt. Great Britain needs to be a less attractive place for illegal workers. That's what British Prime Minister David Cameron is saying today as he unveils new controls on immigration.
Uncontrolled immigration means too many people coming to the UK legally but staying illegally. And people are fed up with a system that allows those who are not meant to be in our country to remain here.
Long-term migration has surged in Great Britain, hitting nearly 320,000 people last year. That's compared to about 200,000 the year prior. Cameron says wages paid to illegal immigrants will be seized as crime money. He also wants to restrict migrant access to Britain's welfare system.
Sounds familiar. The Florida pilot accused of flying his tiny chopper across Washington, D.C. is due in a federal courtroom today. Douglas Hughes is facing a half a dozen charges that could put him behind bars for nearly a decade. Hughes flew his chopper, his gyrocopter, as it's been called, to the lawn of the Capitol building to draw attention to needed campaign finance reform, he said. A messy cleanup continues along the California coast today. Crews are out scouring the sand and rocks after that burst pipeline near Santa Barbara dumped tens of thousands of gallons of crude oil on the beach there. Out in the ocean, the oil slick is about 9 miles long. It is the worst spill to hit the Santa Barbara coast in nearly 2 decades.
U.S. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared Bezier joined Newsmax's Ed Berliner to talk about what it was like to serve in Ramadi.
Yeah, now that that city has fallen to ISIS and how it feels to see ISIS troops march through that city.
If I could describe it, it was almost like hell on earth. It was one of the most dangerous places in the world, as we were told. Very intense. We hit the ground running. We were engaged in firefights practically every day. Roadside bombs were everywhere. It was an extremely dangerous place.
When you go in there then, and you said that it was constant at that point, when you first got into Ramadi and started the mission, how long before you got a break? A couple of days, a couple of weeks?
Well, usually we would go about 6 days before we could relax. We would take a rotation, 3 days of constant patrolling, actively hunting the enemy in their neighborhoods. And then the following 3 days, we'd be a part of a quick reaction force to be called if needed. And then the following 3 days would be to rest and do vehicle maintenance and things of that nature.
What do you remember about the city? Because this was the second battle of Ramadi at that time. Were a lot of the buildings already blown out and people living under difficult situations?
It was. When we arrived, it was pretty much war-torn. It was intense, and there was actually areas of the city that we were told not to go into because it was enemy territory. That's how intense the fighting was at the time when we got there.
With what we have seen now, with Ramadi being overtaken by ISIS and the terrorist flag flying over that village, how does that make you feel?
To be honest, it's very saddening. It's hard to see it because of the sacrifices that we made. We fought hard over there to gain control of that city, and it didn't just happen overnight. This took years. It took many battalions, and many brave men gave their lives, fighting for that city, not just for the Americans, but to give it back to the Iraqi people. For the protection of their own city. So it's very sad to see what's happening today.
And we know now the administration is promising to help the Iraqi government take back the city of Ramadi. Time will tell when and if that will happen. We also hear reports of ISIS in Syria gaining more control of that ancient city of Palmyra.
And then we're hearing from people like Jeb Bush blaming the Obama administration for things like that happening. But
there's plenty of blame to go around,
right.
There's no doubt. We also know that the GOP presidential candidates are going to be debating this once those debates get started in August. But Fox News is limiting the first GOP debate to 10 candidates. And according to the National Review's Jim Garrity, under the debate participation rules set by Fox News, Governor Bobby Jindal, former HP CEO Carly Fiorina, former Senator Rick Santorum, Ohio Governor John Kasich, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and former New York Governor George Pataki would not participate in the first Republican debate. Former Texas Governor Rick Perry would be on the bubble. Fox News Channel plans to limit participation in that August 6th debate in Cleveland to the 10 candidates highest in those polls, quote, in an average of the 5 most recent national polls in the run-up to the event. He says in parentheses, Garrity does, I wonder if you'll see a lot of national polls conducted that week.
that's got to be hard. I wonder how many times it's actually happened where you have to say, there's too many of you, we got to limit it.
Well, that was a stated goal of the GOP last time around. They don't want to have these guys and women up there on stage picking each other off. Well, and not everybody on that list is even declared yet, but no. We got more coming up.
Yes.
We'll be back with Todd Wood talking about North Korea's miniaturization of nuclear weapons.